You are not losing control, you are just living on autopilot that you have never dared to face directly. How many times have you told yourself tomorrow you will start? You will wake up earlier. You will be more disciplined. You will do what you clearly know you should do. But then tomorrow comes, and you are still the same person as yesterday. You don't start, or you start and then quit halfway. And every time that happens, you tell yourself a familiar sentence. Maybe I'm just not disciplined enough. But no, that's not where the problem lies. The truth is, you are not weak, you are not lazy, and you are not lacking motivation like you think. You are just being pulled by something stronger than you realize. Something that is not loud, not obvious, but it shows up every day in very small choices. And if you don't see it, you will keep living a life that you once promised yourself you would never live. There are things, if you had understood them earlier, you wouldn't have had to repeat the same cycle for years. You wouldn't have started and then quit. You wouldn't have doubted yourself this much. And you wouldn't have felt like you were gradually losing control of your life. But today we are going to face it directly. Not to blame yourself, but to understand what is really controlling you. And there is a principle at the end. If you truly understand it, you will not go back to your old self again. But before getting there, you need to accept an uncomfortable truth. You are not failing because you don't know what to do. You are failing because you have gotten used to not doing what you know. That is where most people stop. They look at their lives, look at the times they started, and then look at the plans that were never completed, and they quickly conclude, I don't have discipline. I used to think that. I used to believe that there was a special group of people out there, people who wake up on time, work consistently, persist in pursuing their goals, and they have something that I don't, something called discipline. It sounds reasonable, but the longer I live, the more I observe, the more I realize something uncomfortable. The people you think are disciplined are not always strong. They do not always feel like doing things. And certainly they are not always full of motivation. So what makes them different? The answer is not strength, nor is it willpower. It lies in how they design their lives. You see, your problem is not that you cannot control yourself. The problem is that you are putting yourself in situations where losing control is almost inevitable. It's like placing a glass of water on the edge of a table and then wondering why it falls. It's not because the glass is weak, but because its position makes falling almost unavoidable. Your life is the same. You say you want to focus, but you live in an environment full of distractions. You say you want discipline, but you expose yourself to things that make it easy to give up. You say you want to change, but you don't change anything around you. And then when you fail, you go back and blame yourself. I'm not saying you have no responsibility. On the contrary, you are fully responsible. But responsibility is not self-blame. Responsibility is understanding what is really happening. And what is happening is not a battle between your strong self and your weak self. It is a battle between two invisible forces. On one side is your intention. On the other side is your inertia. And if you have never noticed, inertia always wins. What is inertia? It is everything you have repeated long enough to the point where you no longer have to think. The way you wake up every morning, the way you react when you are tired, the way you reach for things that make you feel comfortable instead of things that help you grow. You don't choose those things every day. You just repeat them. And that is why no matter how many times you are determined, you still return to your old self. Not because you are weak, but because you are fighting against a system that you have unintentionally built over many years. Imagine you are standing on a slippery slope. You tell yourself, I will stand firm. You try to keep your balance. You tense yourself. But little by little, you still slide down. Not because you didn't try, but because the surface you are standing on does not allow you to stay still. Your life is the same. If your environment, your habits, and the way you respond to your emotions all remain the same, then no matter how hard you try, you will still slide back to the starting point. And that is the most dangerous part. Because after a while, you begin to believe, maybe I really am someone who lacks discipline. You start labeling yourself. And once you believe that, you stop trying. You accept it as part of who you are. But I want you to pause for a moment right here. Think about something you once did well, a period in your life when you were truly focused. When you achieved things you didn't think you could. You have had moments like that. So what changed? Not who you are, but your circumstances, your environment, what you repeated every day. You didn't lose your ability to control yourself. You just are no longer in a system that supports that control. And when you understand that, you start seeing the problem in a completely different way. You stop asking, why am I so weak? And you start asking, what situations am I putting myself in where failure becomes so easy? And when the question changes, the answer begins to change as well. But the story does not end here. Because even if you change your environment, even if you start to better understand your inertia, there is still something else deeper, quieter, that you must face. Something that not only makes you lose control, but also makes you betray yourself without even realizing it. And if you don't see it, you will keep repeating this cycle in another form. Let me tell you, I once knew someone, not the kind of person who obviously fails, but the kind of person who from the outside everything seems fine. He had a job, had plans, even had moments of strong determination. At the beginning of each week, he always started strong, woke up early, made a to-do list. There were even days he worked with a level of focus that surprised himself. But then things started to slow down, not because something big happened. No shock, no obvious failure, just he got a little tired. A workday that lasted longer than expected. One evening, he decided to rest, just a little, and that little stretched out. The next day, he woke up a bit later. No longer felt like starting the way he did yesterday. He told himself, "It's okay, I'll restart tomorrow. You already know what happens next. Tomorrow looks just like today." And then a week passes. No clear progress, but also no major failure. Just a feeling hard to name. A feeling like you are standing still while time keeps moving. The thing is, he wasn't stupid. He clearly knew what he needed to do. He knew that if he kept going like this, nothing would change. But every time it came to action, something held him back. Not strong, not intense, just a very light feeling. I can do it later. And the most dangerous part is that it always feels reasonable. It never tells you, don't do it. It only says, not now. You see, life is rarely destroyed by big wrong decisions. It is eroded by very small delays repeated every day. And after a while, he began to doubt himself. Not a big obvious doubt, not the kind of I am a failure, but something more subtle. Every time he promised to do something, a small voice appeared. Will I really do it? That is when everything started to change. Not on the outside, but on the inside, because when you no longer trust your own promises, every decision that follows becomes weaker. You no longer start with certainty. You start with doubt. And when you start with doubt, you have almost already lost before you begin. I remember one evening he sat alone, no phone, no one around, just silence and a question he could no longer avoid. Why do I keep repeating this? Not once, not twice, but dozens of times. He began to look back, not at big goals, not at long-term plans, but at very small moments. The moment he chose to stay for 10 more minutes instead of starting. The moment he allowed himself to delay just one time. The moment he clearly knew the right thing but still chose the easy one. And then he realized something that left him silent for a long time. He did not fail because he didn't know what to do. He failed because he had become too used to not doing what he knew. It sounds simple, but if you truly sit down and look back at your life, you will see it repeating everywhere. Not in big decisions, but in small choices. You know, you should go to bed early, but you stay a little longer. You know you should start, but you wait for the right feeling. You know you should continue, but you stop because you are no longer interested. And little by little, those choices become who you are. No one notices immediately. There is no moment where everything suddenly collapses. Just one day you look back and you no longer recognize yourself. Not because you changed too much, but because you didn't change at all. And that is what scared him the most. Not failure, but living an entire life while knowing he could become a better version of himself, yet never reaching it. If you see a part of yourself in this story, then you are not the only one. We have all been there. And the problem is not that you start and then quit. The problem is you start without ever understanding what is really pulling you back. And when you don't understand that, you will keep trying, keep failing, and keep thinking the problem is you. But no, the problem goes much deeper. It is not in your actions. It is in the relationship between you and your own promises. And that is where everything begins to break. Because what you are about to realize does not just explain why you lose control, but also explains why you gradually lose trust in yourself. And when that happens, everything becomes far more dangerous. We will go into that right now. There is something that very few people dare to say directly, not because it is hard to understand, but because once you truly see it, you will no longer be able to blame circumstances. Are you ready to hear it? You are not losing control of your life. You are betraying yourself. It sounds heavy, but stay with me for a moment. Every time you tell yourself, tonight I will start, I will wake up earlier, I will finish this task, you are creating a promise. And every time you don't follow through, even if it is something very small, you are not just missing an action. You are sending a very clear signal inward. My words are not trustworthy. You don't feel it immediately. No explosion, no warning, just a small crack. Then again, another crack. And over time, those cracks begin to connect. You still live normally, still talk about goals, still have moments of strong determination, but deep inside something has changed. You no longer trust yourself. Not in the way of, I am useless, but in the way that when you say, I will do it, a part of you responds, we'll see. That is a very dangerous moment, because from that point on, every decision you make begins to weaken. You no longer act with certainty, you act with doubt. And when you doubt yourself, you will always look for an escape, a reason to delay, a reason to stop, a reason to return to what is familiar. You see, the problem was never that you didn't know what to do. The problem is, you no longer believe that you will do it. And when that belief is gone, discipline disappears with it. Not because you are not strong enough, but because you no longer have a foundation to stand on. Imagine you are building a house. Every action you take is a brick. Every promise you keep is a layer of cement. But every time you break a promise to yourself, you remove a brick. At first, nothing happens. The house still stands, but then one day, you begin to feel it shake. You try to build more. You try to do more. You try to be stronger. But you don't understand one thing. You are not lacking bricks. You are lacking a foundation. And that is why you can have motivation one day but lose it the next. You can feel determined in the morning but give up in the evening. Not because you changed, but because your foundation was never strong enough. And that foundation is not built from emotions. It is built from promises that are kept. Small things. Very small. So small you often ignore them. Something you say you will do and you do it. A decision you say you will keep and you keep it. It does not need to be perfect, just consistent. Because every time you keep your word to yourself, you are sending the opposite signal. My words have value, and over time that trust begins to return. But before you get there, you must face another truth. A truth that many people do not want to accept. You do not only betray yourself in your actions, you also betray yourself in how you treat your own emotions. Whenever you are tired, you run away. Whenever you are uncomfortable, you try to avoid it. Whenever you don't feel like doing something, you allow yourself to stop. You think you are listening to yourself, but in reality, you are letting your emotions control you. And emotions always choose the easiest path. Always. If you are tired, it will tell you to rest. If you are bored, it will tell you to stop. If you are afraid, it will tell you to go back. And if you always follow, you will never go further than where you are standing. Not because you cannot, but because you have never learned how to stay with discomfort long enough. This is where many people give up. Not in the action, but in the emotion that comes with that action. You can start, but when discomfort appears, you withdraw. And every time that happens, you reinforce a belief. I am not the kind of person who can do this. But pause for a moment. Look directly at this. It is not that you cannot. You just have never stayed long enough, never gone through the first layer of discomfort, never given yourself the chance to see what happens after. And that is why everything in your life keeps repeating. The same cycle, the same starting point, the same ending point. The only difference, time keeps passing. But when you understand this, when you truly see how you are betraying yourself, a door begins to open, not the door of motivation, but the door of truth. You begin to understand that to regain control, you do not need to become a completely new person. You just need to stop betraying yourself in the smallest things. And from there, everything begins to change. But there is still one more thing, something even more subtle, that you interact with every day, and it silently determines whether you keep or break your promises. Something that if you do not change, all your efforts will return to the same place. It is not inside you, it is around you, and you have been in it longer than you think. It is not inside you, it is around you. And if you have never noticed, then most of the decisions you think are yours are actually prearranged. I am not saying this to make you feel powerless. I am saying this so you can begin to see clearly. You think you are choosing to rest, but in reality, you are reacting to fatigue that you have never learned how to handle. You think you don't feel like it, but in reality, you are being pulled by an environment that makes focusing harder than usual. You think you lack discipline, but in reality, you are living in a system where giving up is much easier than continuing. Think about something very simple. If you place a chair right next to your bed, and you decide to just sit for a bit, you know what will happen. Not because you are weak, but because you are putting yourself in a position where lying down is almost inevitable. Your life is the same. You do not live in a vacuum. You live in an environment. What you see every day, who you talk to every day, the small habits you repeat every day, All of those things are shaping how you think and how you act. And the most dangerous part is that it happens very quietly. No sound, no warning. Just little by little, you become the version that your environment allows you to become. Imagine you have a very good seed. You take care of it. You believe in it. But you place it in dry soil, lacking light, lacking water. Can you blame the seed? Can you say it is not strong enough? Or is the truth that environment does not allow it to grow? Now come back to yourself. You want to change. You want to be more disciplined. You want to control your life. But you keep everything around you the same. You still stay in spaces that make you easily distracted. You still spend time with people who are not on the same path. You still expose yourself to things that give you immediate comfort but pull you away from your long-term goals. And then you ask yourself, why can't I change? That is not the right question. The right question is, where is this environment pulling me? Because no matter how good your intentions are, if you live in an environment that pulls you down, you will always have to fight against it. And no one can fight their environment forever. Sooner or later, you will get tired. Sooner or later, you will give in. Not because you are weak, but because you are going against the current every day. And no one can swim against the current forever without exhaustion. But more importantly, it is not only the external environment, it is the internal environment, your emotions. Every day, you wake up in a different state. Some days you feel full of energy. Some days you feel heavy. And if you have never learned how to understand your emotions, you will always be controlled by them. You will only act when you feel like it. You will stop when you lose interest. You will delay when you are not ready. It sounds reasonable, but if you live that way, your life will always be determined by things that constantly change. Emotions are unstable, unreliable. They are like the weather. You cannot build a stable life on something that changes every hour. And that is why many people start strong but do not go far. Not because they lack potential, but because they have never learned how to act when they do not want to. They only act when their emotions allow it. And that is a very subtle trap, because it makes you believe you are listening to yourself, but in reality, you are being controlled. Look back. The times you delayed, were you feeling tired? The times you gave up, were you no longer interested? The times you returned to old habits, were you seeking comfort? If the answer is yes, then you are not losing control. You just have never taken control. And when you understand this, another door begins to open. You begin to realize that to change your life, you cannot just change your thoughts. You must change your environment. And you must learn how to not react immediately to your emotions. You must learn to stay. Stay when you are tired. Stay when you do not want to. Stay when everything inside you is saying, just quit. Not to torture yourself, but to prove something very simple. You have a choice. Not your emotions, not your environment, but you. And when you start doing that, even just once, something very interesting happens. You begin to feel you are no longer being pulled. You begin to see you can pause before reacting. You begin to see you can choose. And that is the starting point of control. Not perfect control, but enough control to change direction. But the question is, how will you do that in real life every day when everything is still the same? How do you not just understand, but actually change? That is where most people go back to the starting point, because they try to change with big decisions. While the truth is, your life does not change with big things. It changes with very small things that you repeat. That is where we go next. And this is where everything begins to change. Not with a big decision, not with an emotional promise, but with very small things so small you once thought they did not matter. You have tried to change your life with a fresh start. One day you wake up full of energy. You make plans. You set goals. You tell yourself, from today, everything will be different, but you cannot sustain it. Not because you do not try hard enough, but because you are trying to change too much while your old system is still intact. You are trying to run fast on a slippery road, and that cannot last. The truth is, your life does not change in big moments. It changes in very small moments that you often ignore. The moment you get up or stay a little longer. The moment you start or delay. The moment you continue or stop. Those moments are not loud, not memorable, but they repeat. And that repetition creates inertia. Imagine a very large wheel. At first, it is very heavy. You need a lot of force to move it. But once it starts turning, it begins to turn on its own. It does not need much force anymore. Your life is the same. If you repeat wrong actions, your life will drift in that direction, without effort. But if you start repeating the right actions, even very small ones, a new inertia will be created. At first, very difficult. You will have to force yourself. You will have to go against your emotions. But if you stay long enough, something very interesting happens. It becomes easier. Not because you are stronger, but because your system has changed. And that is where true discipline appears. Not forcing yourself to do big things, but designing small things easy enough that you cannot refuse. For example, instead of saying, I will work 3 hours every day, you start with, I will sit down and work for 10 minutes. Instead of saying, I will completely change my habits, you start with, I will do one right thing every day. It sounds too small, but that is the point. It is small enough that you do not need motivation. It is small enough that you do not need inspiration. You just need to do it. And every time you do, you are doing two things at once. You complete an action, and you rebuild trust in yourself. That is what matters. Not how much you do, but that you begin to believe what I say I will do. And when that belief returns, everything else begins to follow. You no longer need to force yourself so much. You no longer have to struggle with yourself every day. You begin to act as a natural part of who you are. But there is something you need to understand clearly. Microdiscipline is not a quick solution. It does not give you immediate results. You will not see big changes after a few days. Even after a few weeks, things may still feel the same, and this is where many people quit, not because it does not work, but because they do not see results fast enough. They return to old ways. They look for a bigger solution, faster, stronger, and then they fail again, not because the method is wrong, but because they did not stay long enough to see it work. Remember this, life does not reward you for starting. It rewards you for continuing. And continuing is not about doing big things. Continuing is not stopping in the small things. Go back to the image of the slope. If you do not climb, you will slide. But if you climb step by step, you will not notice immediately that you are going up. Only when you stop and look back will you see how far you have come. That is how life changes. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly and surely. And when you understand this, you no longer look for motivation. You no longer wait for inspiration. You just do what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. And that is what separates you from the rest. But there is still one final piece, something that will determine whether you have enough patience to walk this path or not. Because if you do not understand it, you will quit again right before everything starts to change. And that thing has nothing to do with action. It has to do with how you see life. And this is the piece that many people miss, not because it is complicated, but because it does not give an immediate feeling. We live in a world where everything is fast. You do something, you want to see results. You try, you want to see change. You start, you want to know that it is working. But life does not work that way. Life works in seasons. You cannot plant a seed in the morning and by the afternoon demand that it becomes a tree. It sounds simple, but the way you live every day goes against that. You start a new habit, and after a few days, you look at the results. Nothing clearly changes. You begin to doubt. Maybe this method does not work. Maybe this is not for me. And then you stop. Not because you lack persistence, but because you are expecting a season that has not arrived yet. Look back. How many things in your life have you abandoned just because you did not see results fast enough? Not because they did not work, but because you left before they had the chance to grow. This is where many people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is forcing yourself to do hard things. But true discipline is the ability to stay when you have not seen results yet. Stay when everything is still quiet. Stay when you have not received a reward. Stay when no one acknowledges you. Because during that phase, you are doing something more important than results. You are building roots. A tree does not grow from what you see. It grows from what you do not see. Its roots. If you dig it up every day to check if it has grown, you will kill it. And that is exactly what you are doing to yourself. You start a journey. You do it for a few days, then you dig it up to check the results. You see nothing. You quit, then you start again with something else. And like that, you never stay long enough for anything to grow. Understand this clearly. Life does not lack opportunities. It lacks patience. Not passive waiting, but patience in action. You still do. You still move forward. But you do not rush for results. You trust the process. And that is what separates those who truly change from those who just start and quit. Those who change are not always motivated, but they understand one thing. Every day they do the right thing is a day they are planting. And they know the harvest will come. Not today, not tomorrow, but certainly it will come. And when you truly understand this, a huge pressure disappears. You no longer feel like you have to change immediately. You no longer panic when you do not see results. You just focus on one thing. Today did I plant? Not planting a lot, just planting. One right action, one promise kept, one small step in the right direction. And tomorrow you do it again. That is how a new life is built. Not with big leaps, but with steps small enough that you do not stop, but right enough that you do not go in the wrong direction. And then one day you look back. There is no explosion moment, no point where you can say, this is when everything changed. It is just you realize you are no longer the same person. You no longer procrastinate like before. You no longer give up as easily as before. You no longer doubt yourself like before, not because you try harder, but because you stayed long enough to become a different person. And that is what most people never experience. Not because they cannot, but because they do not wait long enough to see their season come. And if there is one thing you remember from everything we have said, remember this. You do not fail because you lack ability. You fail because you leave too soon. And when you understand that, you no longer look for the fastest path. You choose the right path, and you walk until it takes you where you want to go. Now, all that remains is a very simple question. Are you ready to become the person your life is demanding or not? We will end there. And after everything we have just gone through, I want you to pause for a moment. No need to take notes. No need to try to understand more. Just look back at yourself. Not the version you want to become, but the version you are repeating every day. How do you wake up? How do you respond to fatigue? How do you treat your promises? Because in the end, your life is not determined by what you think. It is determined by what you repeat. You do not need a big turning point. You do not need a powerful awakening moment. You just need honesty. Honesty to see that you have known what to do for a long time, but you have not done it. Not because you cannot, but because you have gotten used to not doing it. And when you accept that, not to blame yourself, but to start again in a different way, everything begins to change. Not immediately, not loudly, but deep inside you begin to feel something very strange. You begin to trust yourself a little more, not because you did something big, but because for the first time after a long time, you did what you said. Just one small thing, but enough. Enough to create a crack in your old self. And from that crack, a new person begins to form. Not perfect, not strong immediately, but real. And when you continue day after day, no need to be perfect, just do not stop, you will reach a point you never imagined. A point where you no longer have to force yourself to start. You no longer have to struggle every day. You just do, because that is who you are at that point. And that is when you realize you never truly lost control. You just never learned how to rebuild yourself from the smallest things. If today there is one thing you take with you, do not take everything. Just take this one thing. Do not make many promises. Keep one small promise. Today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, one thing you have been delaying, one thing you clearly know, and do it. No need to be perfect. No need to do it the right way. Just do it. Because that is the only way you break out of this cycle. Not by understanding more, but by acting differently. If you are still here and you have reached these final lines, maybe you are not just watching a video. You are looking for a way to change your life. And if this resonates with you, let me know. Leave a mark in the comments below. Not for me, but to remind yourself that I am still here. I have not quit. And if you want to continue this journey, subscribe to the channel. Not to watch more videos, but to remind yourself every day that you can become a different person. A person who keeps their word to themselves. And before you leave, I want to leave you with one sentence that I believe, if you truly understand it, it can change how you see your entire life. Success is not something you chase. It is something you attract by who you become. So the final question for you is, today, who are you becoming?